So, Eric, we ought to talk about a little AEW. They have hit a home run, I thought, creatively this past week. I was really excited talking about this with you last week. I was getting hyped up and convincing myself that Ric Flair was going to insert himself into Sting's first chance at AEW Gold when he and Darby Allin took on Ricky Starks and Big Bill for the tag straps. Turns out Ric Flair wasn't even there. And Ric Flair did not screw Sting out of the championship. In fact, as you and I are talking, just weeks before his retirement, Sting is an AEW World Tag Team Champion. Can't believe that. I love it. I'm so happy for him. And he has given the rub with a capital R to Darby Allin. Unfortunately, there wasn't much time to celebrate, because after the match, here came the Young Bucks. And the Young Bucks didn't just go ahead and lay waste to Sting and Darby Allin, but Sting's sons, who, as I understand it, live out in that part of the country. They were in Phoenix, I believe. And both of Sting's sons were front row. Sting hugged them before he got into the ring to start the match. And then after the match, they came into the ring to celebrate with their dad. It was a family affair. By the way, Sting's a grandfather now. What a fun sentence that is. So we really got to see the family side of Sting for the first time in his career. I don't think we've ever seen Sting with a big acknowledgement of his family like this. And it happened. And it was an incredible angle. I know you had a chance to look at it. I really liked it. The Young Bucks were here wearing the all white suit, channeling their inner Jim Cornette, I guess. And man, they were just covered in that blood. It was a beatdown. We wanted to establish these guys as heels, beating up the most beloved figure in AEW, leaving him laying a bloody mess. That checked all the boxes. What'd you think, Eric? You didn't like it.
I didn't dislike it. I didn't like it either. I'm ambivalent about it. And part of that is because I haven't been following. So perhaps I'm not as invested in the story as I could be, or perhaps it's because there's no story to begin with. Let me ask you, Conrad, and I know you probably aren't watching. I mean, you can't possibly watch all the wrestling that's going on and run a mortgage company like you have and do all the podcasts you do. There's just not enough hours in a day. That being said, why are the Bucks heels? What is their motivation? What changed? Do you know?
In storyline?
Yeah.
The backlash over the CM Punk stuff.
Fucking weak. That is so weak. That is an excuse for a match. That is not a story.
Well, hang on now. They turned their persona changed because they said they wanted the credit for starting this place and creating all these jobs and bringing a real revolution and blah, blah, blah. But I do think there was a contingent of fans who decided they didn't like the Young Bucks because of some backstage shenanigans, which, whatever, that was like 100 years ago at this point. But I also know that, respectfully, if Sting wants to work with the Young Bucks, and it's going to be Sting's last match, the audience is going to want to cheer Sting in order to tell the type of story and have the type of tornado style tag team wrestling where we're brawling all over the place and jumping off shit and somebody's going through a table. You got to have good guys and bad guys. It can't just be good friends who are jumping off buildings on each other. These have got to be good guys and bad guys. So if Sting wants to wrestle them, and he wants that to be his last match, you've got to find a way to make him a heel, right?
Yeah, you do, but they didn't. That's my point.
Okay.
And we talked a little bit about the decentralization of control and power that social media has now, the influence social media has on professional wrestling and the direction of characters and stories. So I understand to a degree that because of the silliness, the negativity, the CM Punk, the politics and all that, and how in the minds of some, not all, that the Young Bucks were using their influence and help create that situation, and that there was a backlash. But I think There's just no story there. It's an excuse for a story. Everything that you just said supports my thesis that there is no real creative or storytelling ability or discipline in AEW. It's simply creating situations that justify a match. And everything that you just said is an example of my criticism. There was not an inciting incident. There was not a compelling. That's the key word. People say, oh, there's such a great story in AEW. No, there's not. There are excuses for matches. There are angles that are used as an inciting moment to create an excuse for matches going forward. But there's no beginning and there's no arc to any of these stories or the characters involved in them. Simply making, first of all, two guys that couldn't be heels. If you soaked them in gasoline and set them on fire, they could not get heat. They're just not heels. They're good guys, phenomenal athletes and performers that are playing the role of a heel because timing requires it. And oh yeah, there's a little bit of this backstage political internet wrestling bullshit that we're feeling pressure from. So I got it. Let's just make them heels. It's not a compelling reason. It's the exact opposite of why people are so invested in Cody Rhodes and his story right now, because of the authenticity in it, because people can relate to how Cody Rhodes feels deep down inside because something is being taken from him. You've got two guys, like I said, that are never going to be heels, no matter what they do. And they're taking on this role to support the fact that Sting wants to have a match with them. It's interesting. And for those people that are interested in seeing the best match possible with Sting in his last match, I 100% agree that the Young Bucks are ideal candidates for that role. But it's incumbent upon creative to make that heel turn, to make the fact that now the Young Bucks are heels. You have to make that believable. There has to be a reason for it creatively that the audience can wrap their heads around and invest in. And simply turning them heel because of some internet backstage nonsense and jealousy is not compelling. It's an excuse.
Eric, what did you think of the fucking angle?
When they just jumped in and got heat at the end of a match?
They beat up Sting.
And their family was involved. Gee, I don't know. I've seen it about 1,000 times. So nothing new there. Nothing different than.
Well, you just have a hard on.
Nothing to make me go, ooh, wow, I never thought that would happen. It just was what it was. Was it executed well? I guess. No, I'm throwing a flag on the excessive blood. I think that, again, is an indication of lack of understanding of what creates heat and creates emotion. But it was executed fine. I just didn't care. And the reason I didn't care is because there was no reason for me to care beyond the physicality that we saw. That's not compelling. That's just action.
I'm sure the Young Bucks will explain what they did in a promo this week. They still have a few weeks to go. I guess they're 3 weeks out from the pay-per-view, but, what would you have rather seen instead, Eric? Since you're critical of creative, do you have a different idea that you would have preferred?
First of all, let's go back to Ric Flair. Big deal out of Ric Flair. Where was Ric Flair? Where was anybody else on that roster that just sat back and let that happen? And I know that's a criticism that we've all heard before, and I've heard it as well with regard to some of the things that I've done, which is probably why I'm bringing it up. So I've made that mistake. I've been in that situation. It just seemed like that's a giant hole in the story of everything that's presented up to this point. Why wasn't Rick there? Now, maybe they're going to make a story out of that. Perhaps. Applaud them if they do, because you have to fill that hole. That's a big hole in that story, only because they created it by bringing in Rick and making a big deal and getting people, including me, emotionally invested in the idea of what can happen. And then he's gone. I didn't hear any commentary. I didn't hear one note in the commentary about the fact that Rick wasn't there. It's like Ric Flair didn't even exist. That's kind of a giant hole in that story that, if nothing else, subconsciously takes me out of it. I'm invested because of Rick, because of the legacy between Rick and Sting and the potential that provides. And then poof, he's gone like he never existed. That's that's an example of why I can't get excited about the story aspect of it. Will I be excited to see Sting perform? Absolutely. Do I think the Young Bucks will go out there and work their guts out to make Sting look like $1,000,000 for his last match? I absolutely believe that. But I'm just not invested in the story. Therefore, I kind of don't care beyond my personal relationship connection to Sting. I just don't care. The fact that his kids jumped in there. First of all, either one of those kids would beat the shit out of both those guys at one time. It's not a believable scenario for them just to come in and just lay waste to Sting's kids. It's just nothing about it registered to me. And I wanted to, because I like Sting. I want to be out here. I want to be sitting in front of this microphone talking about what a great story and a great match ultimately that Sting is going to have for his last match. I want to celebrate that, but I'm not going to lie to myself in the process and say, well, that's a great angle. That's a great story. I get why the Young Bucks are heels. I really hate those two bastards because they got heat on the internet because of the Punk situation.
I hate the Young Bucks because they beat up Sting and his family and left him laying a bloody mess. That's why I hate the Young Bucks. Like,
all right, well then you're satisfied and happy and you feel differently about it than I do. I just, from a storyline perspective, I think the holes in that story are so gaping between.
You haven't even been watching the show, and now you're saying the holes in the story are so gaping.
Well, I asked you, what is the reason, the one thing that could make me interested in this matchup as it's laid out right now is why are they heels? And
wait, heel. Wait, hang on. Let's back up. I thought you meant pre. The reason they're heels now is because they want to run Sting out of AEW. The idea is they have created this opportunity for all these new wrestlers, and here's Sting trying to hang on to last little minute of glory and blah, blah, blah. So they're going to exert their dominance in the tag team division and the AEW division and AEW corporate and use their role as executive vice presidents to beat up Sting, Darby, and Sting's kids and take back what's rightfully theirs, the tag team gold, and leave them laying a bloody mess. Like, heels do bad shit. And we don't have to always know exactly what their motivation is before they do bad shit. They can tell us after the fact. I'm sure we're going to hear about that, but it's very heelish to beat up, quote unquote, the old man who's finally got his moment to shine here and steal his thunder and beat up his kids. And now they're going to try to take his championship and send him packing and finish his career with a loss. And yeah, that's pretty heelish behavior, Eric. And for you to be so hardcore against it, this is like the first time, because you get accused of this all the time, but I always defend you. But this is the first time it feels like you might actually be a damn AEW hater. That was pretty fun stuff right there. I dug it.
That's bullshit. It was a fun angle. It is not a great story. What I'm saying, and this is where you and I are going to take different paths or approaches to this. Everything that you just laid out to me on a piece of paper kind of makes sense, but in its execution is non-compelling. It is not a compelling story. It's just not. It's an angle, and it's worked 1,000 times. We've seen it 1,000 times. And by the way, that in itself is not a criticism. There's 7 basic stories that have ever been told since the beginning of time. And all we do is continue to put variations on that story to create a new story. So I'm not suggesting that they have to come up with something that's never been done before, because that's really difficult in wrestling. It's difficult in anything. But the story as it's being told, as you just laid it out, makes perfect sense on paper, but it's not compelling. How many people watch the show Thursday night?
I don't have the rating in front of me. It's a Wednesday night.
805. I do. They actually dropped from the week before with this match and the focus that's on it and Sting's retirement and Sting's first shot at AEW Gold, 805,000, which is about a 2 or 3% drop from the previous week. Watch that show. I'm not the only one that doesn't find this story compelling. It hasn't moved the needle. Whatever they have done, whether I've watched it or not, is not reflected by the interest in the audience.
Eric, my enjoyment on something I don't care how many people watch The Sopranos. If I like it, I like it. So I don't care how many people were watching it. I thought it was good. You didn't enjoy it. And maybe that's because I'm just a fan of Sting and you still wish he was tan. I don't know, but it's like,
no, because you asked me specifically, what about this? What was my reaction to it? How do I feel about it? And I'm explaining to you that while the action was good, I understand it. I'm not invested. I don't believe in the Young Bucks as heels because they haven't done anything other than their attack on Sting and some of their backstage antics. They haven't done anything to make me really believe they're heels. They're just playing a role. And it's not believable to me. You asked me the question. I don't really give a fuck how many people watch the show or don't. But as it relates to, is it a compelling story? I think it's a fair argument to look at the audience and the trends of the audience.
They didn't know the Young Bucks were going to attack them and leave them laying. Like, we should judge that based on next week's rating, right?
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Let's see.
I mean, say, like, you got to start a story somewhere. And there was a rumor that it was going to be the Young Bucks. Now we know for sure it's going to be the Young Bucks. Like, we've only just seen the match become official. But let me say this.
That's fair.
The idea that you're going to say it's not compelling, stick it up your ass. They sold 16,000 tickets. Greensboro keeps selling out. AEW TIX. If you're a Sting fan like I am, go to AEWTIX.com. See if there's a few left. There's still a handful of production kills. I've had people come out of the woodwork asking, can you get me tickets to Greensboro? No, I cannot. There are no comps, not even within the company. That's where they are. No comps for Greensboro. It is a compelling story. It might not be exactly what you wanted to see, but people are invested in seeing.
So those 16,000 people bought those tickets because of the story or because it's Sting's last match?
Well, respectfully, the story that has been told with Sting over and over and over again in TNA and WWE, a lot of those sucked. And his last match in WWE was a whimper. And his last match in TNA was right down the road here for me in Huntsville. It was sparse and it was a whimper. They had EC3 and Magnus beat him in back-to-back tapings. Not good. I think this is I hope we get a proper send-off of Sting. And yeah, I think fans are turning out because they want to see this AEW version of Sting paired with Darby Allin, doing a tornado tag, jumping off shit, going through tables. Yeah, I think AEW's done a good job with it. I mean, I think the proof's in the pudding with the ticket sales.